The battlefield was silent after the smoke cleared, but silence never meant peace. The ground still shook from the echoes of weapons that had fired only moments before. Broken steel, shattered rocks, and scorched earth stretched in every direction. Among the ruins, a lone human soldier, weary and bruised, moved cautiously through the debris. His name was Daniel. He had fought through countless battles, but this one felt different. Something about the air was heavier, as though the world itself held its breath. Daniel's mission was simple: survive and regroup with his unit. Yet fate rarely followed orders. As he stepped over a collapsed wall, his ears caught a faint sound. It wasn't the rustle of enemy armor, nor the whine of a weapon charging. It was softer, almost fragile, a cry. At first, he thought it was the wind tricking his senses, but then it came again, weak and trembling, a sound of pure fear. Cautiously, Daniel followed the sound. His boots crunched over broken glass and twisted metal until he reached the remains of a ruined shelter. Inside, partially covered by rubble, was something that made him freeze. It wasn't a soldier. It wasn't an enemy fighter. It was a child. The child had skin that shimmered faintly under the dim light, different from any human, and large eyes filled with tears. It was clear. The child was alien, the very species Daniel's people were at war with. The little one's body shook as though it was too weak to move. Its small hands clutched at its side where a deep wound bled slowly, staining the dust around it. Daniel's heart pounded. His training told him to move on. This was the enemy's offspring. Saving it could mean betrayal in the eyes of his own people. But another part of him, a part deeper than orders and commands, refused to leave the child to die alone in the rubble. He knelt slowly, lowering his weapon so the child could see he meant no harm. "It's okay," he whispered, though he knew the child might not understand his words. His tone, however, carried gentleness that any living being could feel. The child flinched at first, trying to back away, but its strength gave out. Daniel carefully reached forward, moving aside the stones, pinning the little body down. Every movement brought a soft whimper from the child, but he kept speaking, low and calm, as if his voice could soothe the pain. When he finally lifted the child into his arms, he felt the heat of its fever and the trembling of its frail frame. The wound was worse than he expected. He tore a strip from his uniform and pressed it gently against the bleeding side. The child winced, but its tiny fingers clung to him, not pushing away. In that moment, Daniel made his choice. Orders didn't matter. Sides didn't matter. What mattered was the life he now carried. Minutes stretched into hours as he searched for a safe place. He found an abandoned bunker half buried under stone. There, he laid the child down and tried to clean the wound with what little supplies he had left. He had no proper medicine, only water from his canteen and the cloth from his gear. Still, he worked with patience, whispering softly every time the child stirred. The pain seemed unbearable, and Daniel wished he could take it away. Without hesitation, he pressed harder on the wound to stop the bleeding, letting the sharp pain cut into his own hands as though he could draw the suffering into himself. His face tightened, but he didn't stop. For every cry the child made, he whispered comfort, and for every tear that fell from those alien eyes, he silently promised safety. When exhaustion overcame the little one, it finally closed its eyes and rested against him. Daniel sat there, holding the child in his arms, staring at the distant sky through the cracks above. The stars looked cold and far, but for the first time in days, he felt warmth. He thought of the irony. Here he was, a soldier meant to fight, against this very species now protecting one of its most innocent members. He wondered what his fellow soldiers would say if they saw him. Would they call him a traitor? Would they understand? He didn't know, and in truth, he didn't care. What mattered was that the child lived. As he held the sleeping little one, Daniel realized something about himself. War had taken so much from him: friends, family, peace. But it hadn't taken his humanity. It hadn't taken his ability to care even for the so-called enemy. Far away, he knew battles were still being fought. He knew danger would soon find him again. But for this one night in the broken silence of a ruined world, a human soldier and an alien child shared something rare: trust. Daniel leaned his head back against the wall of the bunker, closing his eyes just for a moment. His body was tired, his wounds stung, and yet his heart felt strangely lighter. For once, he wasn't just surviving, he was protecting. He was giving meaning to all the pain he carried. The child stirred in his arms and mumbled softly in a tongue he couldn't understand. But Daniel didn't need to. The tone was enough. It was the sound of gratitude, of safety. He smiled faintly, whispering, "Rest now. You're safe." Outside, the night deepened, but inside the bunker, something new had begun. A fragile bond was formed, not of politics, not of strategy, but of compassion. And that bond, Daniel knew, would change everything. The morning sun rose weakly through the smoke-filled sky, casting a pale light over the ruins. Daniel had barely slept. His mind kept circling the same questions. What will happen if my own people find out I saved the enemy's child? What if the aliens find me with their young one? Will either side forgive me? The child stirred, blinking with heavy eyes. Its wound was still painful, but the bleeding had slowed. Daniel gently gave it a sip of water from his canteen, guiding the small hands so they could hold it. The child looked up at him with eyes full of something he didn't expect: trust. It was strange. They came from different worlds, different species, yet in that moment, none of that mattered. He spoke softly, though he knew the child probably didn't understand his words. "You're going to be all right. I'll make sure of it." The bunker offered some shelter, but it couldn't protect them forever. Food was running out, supplies were low, and most of all, patrols from both sides could pass through at any moment. Daniel knew he had to move, but where? He couldn't risk walking into his own camp carrying the alien child. His people would never allow it. They would see the child as a threat, a reminder of the enemy they had lost so many lives fighting. But leaving the child behind was unthinkable. Daniel had already taken the pain once to keep it alive. His choice had tied their lives together. Hours later, he heard footsteps, echoing faintly in the ruins. Quickly, he pressed the child close to his chest, hiding them deeper in the shadows of the bunker. His grip tightened on his weapon as voices drifted closer. Human voices. "Over here. Check the shelters," one of them called. Daniel's heart pounded. It was his unit, or what remained of it. Relief and fear mixed inside him. If they found him, they would see the child. What would he say? That he protected it out of kindness? That he couldn't let it die? He knew how soldiers thought. Kindness didn't survive long in war. Orders mattered more than hearts. The boots grew louder, but fortune gave him a narrow escape. The search party only glanced inside before moving on, muttering that the shelter was empty. Daniel stayed perfectly still until their footsteps faded into the distance. Only then did he allow himself to breathe again. The child looked up at him, sensing his tension. Its small hand reached out weakly, touching the sleeve of his uniform. That tiny gesture, so innocent and trusting, struck him harder than any battle he had fought. He whispered, "I guess it's just you and me, little one." But news travels fast on a battlefield, even faster than bullets. It didn't take long for whispers to spread. A few soldiers claimed they saw Daniel carrying something through the ruins. Others spoke of a rumor, an alien child that had survived, the last clash, protected by human hands. Among the alien ranks, the story grew as well. Scouts reported that one of their young had been saved, not by their own, but by an enemy soldier. Many refused to believe it. Others were furious. Yet some, secretly, felt a strange respect. Mercy was not common in war, and the idea that a human could show it challenged everything they thought they knew about their enemies. Daniel remained hidden with the child, but he felt the weight of eyes he couldn't see. Suspicion grew among his own men. Every time he walked past them, he felt their stares, sharp and questioning. One soldier even asked him directly, "What were you carrying that day? Some alien weapon?" Daniel gave no answer. He knew the truth would only put the child in danger. The more he protected the young one, the more divided the world around him seemed. To his comrades, he looked like a man losing focus on the mission. To the aliens, he became an unknown figure, a possible enemy, yet also someone who had shown rare compassion. And far away, deep within the alien camp, the child's absence did not go unnoticed. Its mother, a leader of high standing among her people, heard the reports. Her heart clenched with fear and fury. The battlefield had stolen many lives, but losing her own child was a pain sharper than any wound. She demanded answers. When she heard the strange rumor that a human soldier had carried her offspring to safety, her first reaction was disbelief. How could an enemy show such mercy? But as more fragments of reports reached her, doubt turned into restless curiosity. She began to wonder who this human was, and why he had chosen to protect what he could have easily left behind. Meanwhile, Daniel's life grew harder. The child, though recovering, needed more care than he could give. Food was scarce, and his wounds from the last battle slowed him down. Yet every time he considered the weight of his choice, he looked at the child and found his resolve renewed. He remembered the night he had pressed his hands against the wound, taking the pain upon himself, refusing to let the little one slip away. That moment had changed him. He no longer saw an alien child. He saw simply a child, innocent, fragile, deserving of life. His comrades grew colder toward him, whispering behind his back, and yet deep inside, Daniel knew he would make the same choice again, no matter the cost. For in a war where everything was about destruction, he had chosen creation, choosing to save, not to kill. And that choice was already shaping the path ahead, one step at a time. Far away from the ruined battlefield, in the heart of the alien camp, the atmosphere was tense. The air was thick with whispers. Soldiers stood stiffly, not daring to meet the gaze of their leader. She was tall, regal, and carried herself with an authority that demanded respect. Yet at that moment, her strength seemed shaken. She was a mother before she was a leader. Her child was missing. Reports had come in, scattered and unclear. Some said the young one had been buried under rubble. Others whispered of a miracle, that the child had been carried to safety by none other than a human soldier. At first, she dismissed such a claim as lies, perhaps a trick designed to weaken her will. But as more accounts surfaced, the same detail, repeated again and again, the child lived because of the human. Her heart warred with itself. On one side was the anger of a commander, trained to see humans only as enemies. They had taken countless lives of her people. They were the reason her skies were filled with fire and her lands scarred by war. On the other side was the gratitude of a mother, knowing that someone from the very race she despised, had saved what was most precious to her. Late that night, when the camp was quiet, she walked alone through the corridors of their fortress. Her hands brushed against the cold walls as her mind replayed the image she had been told, a human carrying her child, shielding it, protecting it. The thought struck her heart in ways she didn't understand. She remembered the first time she had held her child, tiny and fragile years ago. That same fragile life had been in the arms of an enemy. Why would he do such a thing? Was it pity? Was it weakness? Or was it something else entirely? The question kept her awake, and she felt a pull deep inside her, a need to see this human with her own eyes. Meanwhile, Daniel remained in hiding. Days passed, each one heavier than the last. Supplies were nearly gone, and his body bore new bruises from traveling through dangerous ground. Yet the child grew a little stronger with each sunrise. Its wound began to close, though it still leaned against him for comfort, clutching his uniform whenever it was afraid. Every time Daniel looked into the child's eyes, he felt something shift inside him. He had come to this war believing survival meant following orders without question. But saving the little one had awakened something long buried, his ability to care beyond sides and flags. Still, whispers of his actions traveled further. Some human soldiers started avoiding him, muttering that he had gone soft. Others looked at him with suspicion, waiting for a reason to accuse him of betrayal. Daniel knew it was only a matter of time before someone confronted him directly. But what he did not know was that someone else was already searching for him, the child's mother. When she first saw him from a distance, hidden behind the shadows of ruined buildings, she froze. Her breath caught in her throat. There he was, the human soldier spoken of in the reports. He sat quietly, holding her child close, adjusting the makeshift bandage with a gentleness that struck her heart like an arrow. She expected to feel rage. She expected to see cruelty in his face. But what she saw was something she had not seen in a long time, even among her own kind: compassion. From the cover of the ruins, she watched. He spoke softly to the child, even though he knew it would not understand. His voice was calm, soothing, filled with patience. The way he looked at her offspring, it was not the look of an enemy. It was the look of someone who had chosen to protect. Her emotions swirled within her like a storm. Why, she asked herself, why would a human risk everything for my child? She thought of her people, of the soldiers who had followed her into battle without question. Many of them would have left the human child of an enemy behind without hesitation. Yet this man had done the opposite. Was he a fool? Or was he something far more dangerous, a man with a heart too strong to be broken by war? The next day, she followed him again, always keeping her distance. Every action she saw only deepened her confusion. He gave the child the last of his food, even when his own stomach growled from hunger. He walked with a limp, clearly injured, but never once put the child down to rest himself. Every sacrifice he made chipped away at the wall of hatred she had, built over years of war. That night, when she returned to her quarters, she could not sleep. She stared at the stars outside her window, her thoughts circling endlessly. She should hate him. She had every reason to hate him. But gratitude, real, undeniable gratitude, pulled at her heart. She whispered softly to herself, "Who are you? Human? And why can't I stop thinking about you?" The days turned into weeks. The bond between Daniel and the child grew stronger, and so did the curiosity of the mother who watched from afar. She began to question not only him, but also herself. Had the war blinded her to the possibility that mercy could exist even in the heart of an enemy? Daniel, unaware of her presence, carried on. He focused only on keeping the child alive, but destiny had already set their paths on a collision course. The soldier who had chosen compassion and the mother who battled between hate and gratitude were bound to meet. And when they did, neither of their lives would ever remain the same. The battlefield never truly slept. Even when the guns were silent, tension lingered in the air like smoke that refused to clear. Daniel knew this well. He had been living between shadows, hiding with the child, moving from one ruined shelter to another. His body was tired, his supplies were nearly gone, but his will remained firm. He had chosen this path and he would not abandon it. The child had grown stronger. Its wound was healing, though slowly. Sometimes it even smiled faintly, when Daniel found ways to distract it with small pebbles or by humming soft tunes. For a brief moment it looked like any other child, innocent, curious, alive. And every time Daniel saw that smile, he felt his own pain fade just a little. But safety was temporary. Each day, danger came closer. Human patrols combed the ruins, searching for survivors. Alien scouts prowled as well, looking for signs of weakness in enemy lines. Daniel had to remain invisible, for both sides would see his act as betrayal. And then, one night, the inevitable happened. While searching for water at the edge of the ruins, Daniel sensed movement. His hand went to his weapon, but before he could raise it, a figure emerged from the darkness. Tall, graceful, yet commanding. She stepped forward with eyes that burned like fire. Daniel froze. He recognized her from descriptions passed among soldiers, an alien leader known for her strength, feared for her strategies. And now, standing before him, was not only a commander, but the mother of the child he held. For a long moment, neither spoke. The child stirred in Daniel's arms, and when it saw her, its eyes lit up. It reached out with small hands, calling softly in its own language. The woman's expression broke. Relief washed over her face, so raw and unguarded that Daniel could almost feel it. She moved closer, her gaze never leaving him. Every step was heavy with conflicting emotions: anger, gratitude, suspicion, and something deeper she didn't want to name. Finally, she stood before him, close enough to touch the child, yet she did not take it. Instead, she looked at Daniel. "You protected my offspring." Her voice was steady, though her eyes betrayed a storm within. Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes." "Why?" she asked. "Why would you save the life of one you were taught to hate?" The question hung between them like a blade. Daniel thought carefully before answering. "Because it was a child. Because it didn't matter what side it was born to. It was alone, afraid, and hurt. I couldn't leave it to die." Her eyes searched, his face as though she wanted to find a lie hidden there. But there was none. His words were plain, his tone calm. She could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the bruises on his body, and yet also the strange strength that came from conviction. For the first time in years, she didn't know what to say. She had built her life on seeing humans as enemies, as destroyers. And here was one who had done the unthinkable, saved, not destroyed. The child clung to Daniel, unwilling to let go, even though its mother stood before it. That sight shook her even more. Her own blood trusted this human, leaned on him, and felt safe in his arms. "I should see you as an enemy," she whispered. "But all I see is a man who kept my child alive." Daniel lowered his gaze. "I'm not your enemy, not today. Not when it comes to this." Their eyes met again, and for a brief moment something shifted. The battlefield outside still raged with hate, but between them something fragile was forming. An understanding neither had expected. In the days that followed, their paths crossed again. She returned to see her child, and each time, she watched Daniel more closely. He was not perfect, he was weary, wounded, stubborn. Yet he carried himself with honor. Even in the smallest acts, sharing food, whispering comfort, standing guard while the child slept. And slowly, she found herself drawn to him, not as an enemy, but as a man who had given her what no battle had ever given her: hope. But war did not stop for their bond. Battles still raged, and both sides grew more suspicious. The human soldiers saw Daniel as a man changed by the enemy. The alien soldiers wondered why their leader lingered near the human ruins. Rumors spread like wildfire. But neither Daniel nor the mother cared. Their focus remained on the child and unknowingly on each other. For in the ruins of war, where trust was a rare treasure, they had begun to build it together. And though neither spoke of it aloud, both knew their lives were no longer the same. The final battle was approaching. Both humans and aliens had prepared for weeks, each side determined to end the conflict once and for all. The air itself felt heavy, carrying the weight of thousands of lives waiting to clash. Daniel knew he could not avoid it. He had protected the child, he had met its mother, and now destiny had pulled him to the center of a storm greater than himself. The night before the battle, Daniel sat in the ruins, the child resting peacefully beside him. He looked at the stars, wondering how many would fall tomorrow. He wondered if he would survive. And more than that, he wondered if the fragile bond he had built, with the child and with the mother, would survive the fire of war. When the fighting began, it was chaos. Explosions shook the ground, weapons lit up the sky, and cries of soldiers filled the air. Daniel fought with all his strength, but his eyes never strayed far from where the child and its mother were hidden. The enemy line pressed forward. Human soldiers shouted, pushing him to move with them. But then he saw it, an attack aimed directly at the place where the child and mother were sheltering. Without a second thought, Daniel broke from his unit and ran. His comrades shouted after him, some calling him a traitor, others simply too shocked to act. But Daniel didn't care. He reached the shelter just as fire rained down. Shielding both mother and child with his own body, he took the blast of debris, pain ripping through him. When the dust cleared, he was still standing, though barely. The mother stared at him in disbelief. He had risked everything, his life, his honor, even his place among his own people, just to keep them safe. "Why would you do this again?" she whispered, voice trembling. Daniel forced a weak smile. "Because I couldn't let them take you away. Either of you." The child clung to him, its small arms wrapping tightly around his neck. And in that moment, the mother's heart broke, free from the chains of hatred. She saw not an enemy, not even just a man, but the one who had chosen to bear pain again and again for the sake of her family. The battle raged on, but something changed. Word spread on both sides of a human who had protected an alien leader and her child, not once but twice. Soldiers hesitated. Some lowered their weapons. For the first time in years, both armies paused to see not just war, but humanity and mercy shining through it. When the fighting finally stopped, silence fell across the field. Both sides stood in disbelief, staring at Daniel, wounded but unbroken, standing beside the alien mother and child. He had become a symbol neither side could ignore. Slowly she stepped forward, her voice carried across the battlefield. "This man is not our enemy. He is proof that even in war, compassion survives. If he can protect us, then perhaps there is a path we have not seen before." Her words stirred something deep within both armies. Soldiers exchanged glances, uncertain but hopeful. The war was not ended that day, but something far more powerful had begun: the possibility of peace. As the armies withdrew, Daniel collapsed from exhaustion, and the mother caught him before he fell. For the first time, she did not see him as a soldier at all. She saw him as the man who had carried her child through darkness, who had stood between her family and death itself. She whispered softly, words meant only for him. "You have taken my pain as your own. And now, you have taken my heart as well." Daniel, half-conscious, could only manage a faint smile. Then maybe, this war has finally given us something worth keeping. The stars above watched silently as a new bond was born. Not from treaties, not from victories, but from sacrifice and compassion. And in that bond lay the fragile hope of two worlds, carried by a soldier, a child, and a mother who dared to desire him not as an enemy, but as the man who had changed everything.